Welcome to Game Over Edmonton. The Edmonton Oilers take a 1-0 series lead in the Western Conference Final in double overtime. Avery Lewis McDougal is here with me. It was the second fastest Edmonton Oilers double overtime goal in franchise history. I think it was the fourth fastest of all time. Do you know who has the fastest, Avery?
Oh my gosh, I should know this. Oh man, double OT fourth fastest. Oh man.
I will give you a hint. It was
Okay.
also against the Dallas Stars.
Oh, I'm gonna say also against Dallas Stars. Ryan Smith.
It was indeed Ryan Smith, a 1
No.
nothing goal from Jason Arnott and Boris Mironov in 1997 in a series that the Oilers won, I believe, in 7 games.
Yes, they
Uh,
did.
it doesn't have it listed on the NHL.com website anymore, but the shots on goal in that game were 43 for Dallas and 28 for Edmonton. I believe it was Cujo, Curtis Joseph, with a 43 save shutout to seal that victory. Obviously, Stu Skinner didn't have to be that good in this one, and we'll talk about the goalies as we go on. But hey, another super quick double OT goal against Dallas. That's got to have the Edmonton Oilers feeling a little good in this matchup. But before we get too deep into it, Avery, let's tell everyone where they can find Game Over Edmonton next year. Because right now, during the relaunch, we're broadcasting from the Game Over Network Hub channel. But
Yes.
next year, you got to go check out Avery and the boys at Game Over Edmonton on their Game Over Edmonton channel. So go to the Game Over Network website right now. Just open it in a new tab, scroll all the way down to the bottom past me talking, and click on the Game Over Edmonton page. Click subscribe. Click that bell. I don't remember what they call it exactly. The notification bell or something, because they have to make it extra complicated so that you're notified when we post new content there, which there will be some hopefully coming during the summer, and then full relaunch in October. And you'll get notified when we go live. So this was a fantastic game. And the takeaway that I had, Avery, coming out of it was
Yes.
these are two teams that are prepared to be here. They've been to this, at least this stage within the last several years.
Mhm.
They've taken steps to improve themselves now that they're here again. And there was no shying away in this one. There were good and bad moments for both teams,
Yeah.
but I thought that these were two teams that looked like they were in it for the long haul, and I think this is gonna be a fantastic series.
No, totally. And seeing how Edmonton rolled again, one of the big things I liked was that, of course, the story, Andrew, is always going to be about what guys like McDavid, Hyman, and Draisaitl do. But you saw chances from guys like Dylan Holloway, someone who I've that liked a lot this postseason. You saw a chance from Evander Kane. You saw other Oilers stepping up to suppress chances from Dallas as well all throughout this game, Andrew.
Yeah, it's true. There was a lot of standouts for Edmonton, and I think it was a game where their depth, I think, showed pretty well. I thought Matthias Janmark had some good moments. I think Brett Kulak, I know he had the whiff on the first Dallas goal there. That
Hmm.
was a tough moment for him, but overall in the game, I thought he played really, really well. You know, Draisaitl and McDavid, it was kind of funny because when Draisaitl scored his goal, the reaction from myself and so much of like social media on hockey is like Draisaitl in the playoffs, just unstoppable. He's at 75 points over his last 41 games, unless he got a point on that winner. I didn't actually see. But he's essentially on pace in the playoffs for a 150-point season in the playoffs. And his career best normal season is 128. And there was a lot of questions when I brought up Draisaitl. A few people quote tweeted me asking like, why don't we talk about McDavid like this? Because now he has 76 points in his last 41 playoff games over the last 3 seasons here. Do you think it's as simple as McDavid does this all the time in the regular season, and Draisaitl is great, but the fact that he's matching McDavid step for step in the playoffs is what makes it so impressive when he's not able to do that in the regular season?
Yeah, no, totally. And really, I think for people, they're not really, I don't want to say that they're surprised, but you expect Connor McDavid to be at that level in the playoffs all the time. I think now narrative is now changed. People are now expecting Drysdale to do that now. They're expecting it now, but it's still very impressive because what Leon is third all time in points per game in the postseason. Third all time. Think of the players who played in this league, Andrew, in big games in the postseason. And Leon is already in top five of those players. It's absurd.
It is completely absurd. He's so good at just, you don't notice him for a second, and then all of a sudden he has the puck and it's in the back of the net. And McDavid got lost in coverage on the overtime winner, which is like, how do you lose Connor McDavid in overtime? But that's what makes these players so special, is that they're able to be elusive and find their ways through these gaps in coverage. And I talked a bit about Zach Hyman last game when the Oilers beat Vancouver. Actually, I think it was game 6. Yeah, because Kaya had game 7. But I talked about Zach Hyman in game 6 about how one of the things that defines him as a player is that he keeps on getting better. He keeps on learning.
Yes.
And that's why he's able to play with an Austin Matthews and why he's able to play with a Connor McDavid. Like, yeah, it's a stylistic thing too, and it's a scoring talent thing for sure. But I think a lot of it is that he learns. And one of the things that I noticed a lot from Hyman in this game is he was running fantastic routes when he didn't have the puck. He was putting a lot of pressure on defenses, getting in close to the net, forcing coverage to move away from Connor McDavid. And that is what makes him so special, I think. And the decision that he made on his goal to haul up in the middle of the zone there, when I think most players would have just continued skating, assuming the play was dead after the puck was intercepted. And then it was like 3 Dallas Stars were like, who's going to take the puck? And it just floated right to Zach Hyman. He's like, okay, thanks. I'll just go in and score here. I love seeing players rewarded for doing the smart stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And with Zach Hyman and just seeing what he's been able to do, you mentioned the learning factor, because you can't be the exact same player, expect to have a 54 goal campaign. He's adapted and figured out how he can hang around guys like Draisaitl, McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, and learn and get those kind of goals. And one thing with Zach Hyman, he's so physically strong, Andrew. Like, that's one thing people don't talk about enough, is that Zach Hyman is so strong on the puck. It's near impossible to move away from the front of the net. It's almost impossible to do that.
And that's a guy who doesn't look physically imposing, right? He's just a solid brick of a person who, is strong, yes, but also unwilling to move, right? He won't cede that space to other players, and that having that fight, it makes such a big difference in the playoffs. And I feel like both of these teams have that in spades. There's wave upon wave that these teams, like, they don't give up. The Stars and the Oilers, they find ways to create offense, whereas we've seen other teams in these playoffs be shut down, be held to the outside. Even though I think both teams played pretty darn well defensively in this one, the talent wins out, right? And that offensive game-breaking talent that both these teams have just makes the series so exciting.
Yeah, it's so true. We saw Hyman score, we saw McDavid score, and for Dallas, we saw Tyler Seguin come in and keep this game alive. And it's funny, you mentioned the Stars, how Dallas has so many stars, pardon the pun, that Tyler Seguin at times almost gets forgotten on the roster, because Tyler Seguin, second overall pick in the draft, and he's a third liner. That is crazy.
Yeah, it is really. I mean, Jamie Benn, former Hart Trophy winner, and nobody talks about him. I know he's not the player that he once was, but he's still a darn good player. And I do want to talk about that line in more depth, but later on in the show. Before we move on to the goalies a little bit, which is going to be our next segment, I do want to touch a little bit on Evan Bouchard, because another big game from Evan Bouchard. I don't know if there's anybody in the league who has developed in terms of how calm he is with and without the puck. I don't know if anybody has moved their game and their mental game more than Evan Bouchard since he came into the NHL, because the book on him early on was, yes, offensively, a lot of talent, great decision making, but could be a little bit panicky. And I see no panic left. I see so much uh, intelligence in that player and intuition in the game that I almost have him up there with McDavid and Draisaitl now in terms of his importance to the Oilers. It's almost like a full-on three-headed monster as opposed to the two superstars, generational talents carrying around the rest of the lineup. And not to say that there's not other great players in the Oilers, but I feel like Bouchard has put himself in that category now where if you're not prepared to call him a superstar, I'm kind of questioning why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Evan Bouchard, the first D-man to have 20 points in the first two rounds. Again, another stat that just blows me away. You mentioned how he's developed so well, Andrew. And of course, the knock on Evan Bouchard for much of this year and before was he's not good in his own end of the ice. He's not responsible. And yes, there were issues with Evan having to clean up his game defensively. But now the stats have shown that I believe the stat was after the series against Vancouver that he when he's on the ice, teams do not score. The Oilers
Yep.
do not score on Evan Bouchard. He's so defensively aware now, where him as a pairing, him and Matthias Ekholm, it's impossible to score when that pairing is on the ice now, Andrew.
Yes, it's really impressive to watch, and playing with Matthias Ekholm is a nice bump. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit of a step up from his former partners in Edmonton, but Bouchard is the one driving the bus at this point, and man, like his offensive awareness is just incredible. And there were a few different plays tonight where he broke up dangerous looking chances and never really looked even worried about it. I'm really impressed with this player. I think he's a very impressive player to look at, and I wonder if we're gonna go through his career and he's gonna
Mm.
get the Chris Letang treatment, where because Crosby and Malkin were there, people don't appreciate Letang's contributions, I think, as much as they should. And are we gonna see that with Evan Bouchard? Like Chris Letang could have won a Norris in at some point. Not saying he necessarily should have, but he definitely could have. He had the seasons that were good enough to do it.
Oh yeah. He no, I totally agree with that. And I believe, if I was a voter of the awards, I would have had M. Bouchard as a finalist for the Norris this year. I felt Bouchard had done enough this year to get a nomination to be a Norris Trophy finalist. I mean, was he gonna win it? No, I still think that's still thinking you're gonna have Quinn Hughes winning. But I thought Edmund should have been at least number 3 in voting for the Norris.
Yeah, I had him up there too, like at least top five.
Mhm.
He's in that category now, and especially with Cale Makar having an off year in the regular season, like there was a space there for him for sure. Miro Heiskanen, another guy who's in that
Mhm.
conversation, another great
Yes.
game tonight. But you know what? Let's talk goalies. But before we do, I got to tell you about where to find Game Over Winnipeg next season. Game Over Winnipeg is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for right now during the playoffs. However, in October, the network relaunches for real, and Game Over Winnipeg gets its own channel. So for all of your Winnipeg Jets content, fun, news, and analysis, head on over to the Game Over Winnipeg channel from the Game Over Network channel. Open it in a new tab right now, scroll past my ugly mug all the way down, and click on the Winnipeg channel from our featured channels section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit that reminder bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Jets fan friends and family to come check out our awesome community. We promise they won't regret it. And make sure on this video you smash that like button right into oblivion. All right, Avery, we are back. Stu Skinner, I won't say he made me feel calm tonight. I enjoy Stu Skinner. I thought he was an absolute battler tonight. I thought he
Mhm.
fought his way through a lot of traffic, made some extremely big saves at very important times, which, we had a chance to talk to Grant Fuhrer a couple months back here now.
Yes.
And one of the things that he kept on saying in the interview was he doesn't care what the save looks like as long as you make the big save at the right time. And Stu Skinner did that tonight. But now he's 3 wins in a row after coming back from his little sojourn after he was pulled into the rough start to the playoffs. Where are you at with Stu Skinner right now? Are you kind of at the same spot as after the rough start at the beginning of the season and he's found his game, we're good? Or are you still a little bit hesitant?
Honestly, right now I'm good. Right now still looks like the guy who was an all-star last season. He's calming things down, and really, he's making the saves that he has to make. Like tonight, Andrew, none of the goals that beat him were essentially his fault. It was two bad bounces that resulted in goals that got past him. He made a ton of high danger saves, didn't allow too many second chances that were dangerous, and that's what you want in a goaltender. You want your goaltender to make those big saves in the postseason. And there are things he struggled against Vancouver to make. You need a goalie to save you a game here and there in the postseason. And if he can do that again against the Dallas Stars, then this team should be able to move forward. Because if he can keep at bay for a 6 or 7 game series, guys like Robertson, Heiskanen, Ben, Sagan, they should be in good shape, Andrew.
Yeah, I totally agree. And frankly, the Oilers are in a position where what they really need Skinner to do is not lose it for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to be good enough to keep them within striking distance every game. And that's all they really need from a goaltender at this point in time is to be in striking distance of their opponent. And he gave them that and more tonight. I thought he was really, really strong. Uh, like I said, a little bit messy to watch
Mm-hmm.
at times. There was a couple of shots. I think there was one in the third period, like late, or even in the first OT,
Mm-hmm.
that he made the save, but the puck squeaked through his legs and just went wide of the post. Which I was
Yep.
like, oh, like just those little shaky moments, but he fought them off and had some marvelous saves tonight. And at the other end of the rink, Jake Ottinger, as advertised, he was phenomenal. Although the best save of the game, which I thought was Ottinger at first, was actually Chris Tanev.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris Tatum made a great play to really harass McDavid into changing his shot direction because if McDavid can elevate that puck a little bit more, that game is over. Tatum gets a stick in there and bothers Connor enough so he can't lift that shot up past Ottinger's stick. So that was a great play by Tatum. That saved the game for a few more minutes in there, Andrew.
Yeah, it really did. And, it got me thinking because Chris Tanev has had another really strong season after several really strong seasons in Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 34. And I was thinking, how many pure defensive defensemen in the NHL are still impact players at 34 years old? And I was cycling through in my head the players who've had mostly huge defensive impacts over the last couple of decades in the NHL. And the guys that stood out to me, guys that like don't bring a lot of offense, their impact is on penalty differential and defense. That's like the main thing that they bring to the table. There's Chris Tanev, who is still spectacular at 34. Nick Hjalmarsson, whose game
Mm-hmm.
fell apart, I believe, at 30. Mark-Edouard Vlasic, game fell apart at 30 or 31. And then Andy Green was another one that I thought of. Also, his game started to fall apart at 31, but not as drastically as Hjalmarsson and Vlasic, who just like completely fell apart.
Right.
Like Chris Tanev is a very rare player, and I remember it was either last year or a couple years ago. Thomas Drance had put him in as like a second or third place Norris vote, and people gave him a lot of trouble. And he went in and like put the statistical analysis live on Twitter to defend his choice. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, Chris Tanev was that good. He was that good defensively to earn some accolades for the Norris Trophy, and he remains that good. But I just don't know if you can count on any other defensive defenseman to be this good for that long. Like he has had a stellar career.
Yeah, no, there's not that many. And it's funny, I look at the trade deadline and could you imagine if Calgary did trade Tanev to Edmonton? You could have had a back end of Evan Bouchard, Matisse Ekholm, and Chris Tanev in your D-man. That would have been scary.
That
You
would have
could have had
been
that.
that would have been killer. That would have been because that's coming up here on in our next segment. That's I think what's the key to Edmonton this series is
Hmm.
the defensive matchup, and that swing from one team to the other
Yes.
is a huge problem in this series for the Oilers. But before we get into that, we got to tell you all that you got to subscribe to Game Over Calgary. And and I'm going to tell you right now where to find that show.
Game Over Calgary is relaunching in October. For all your Game Over Calgary content, make sure you subscribe to our Calgary-specific YouTube channel. Open the Game Over Network YouTube page in a new tab from this video, scroll past Andrew talking, and click on the Game Over Calgary channel in our featured channel section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit the drop-down menu to get notified when we post videos or go live. Tell all your Flames fan friends and family to check it out and join our awesome community. And make sure you smash the like button on this video right into oblivion.
All right, so for those who are still here, make sure you hit the like button on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the Game Over Network because, listen, we can't do this without our hardcores. And the people who are watching this soft launch, this soft relaunch in the playoffs are our hardcores, right? There are people who've come and subscribed to multiple different channels that are here to support us. So please like the show, like the stream, subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you give us some love because that's the only way that we can really succeed in this business now is if you help us with the algorithms. So Avery, obviously a dominant, even strength matchup for the Edmonton Oilers tonight on the road. Over 50%, over 56% of the shot attempts in favor of Edmonton. Expected goals just under 55% in Edmonton's favor. But there was one matchup that I think is really troubling for the Oilers going forward. And I know that Seguin had a fantastic game, but Jamie Benn and Evgeny Dadonov also had great games, specifically against the Draisaitl line and the Cody Ceci, Darnell Nurse pairing. Now, I know they split Ceci off in the second half of the game or so, there was an adjustment there, and it did seem like in the third period, for whatever reason, the Stars seem to allow the Oilers coaching staff to get away from that Draisaitl versus Seguin matchup. And even though the Oilers were on the road, they were able to move away from that, and it was pretty successful for them. So thing to watch for sure. But how would you handle the second pair for Edmonton? Because they don't have a lot of options. And I'm wondering watching it, because obviously, you want to win the McDavid matchup, and I thought the Oilers did a great job of shutting down that Pavelski and Robertson. And I know Rube Hintz wasn't there tonight, but he will be likely soon. They did a good job shutting down that line. It'll be more challenging going forward with Hintz back in there. But can the Oilers afford to double up McDavid and the Bouchard-Ekholm pairing against that Stars top line and let the rest of the depth fight it out? Because I'm not sure.
Honestly, you don't want to. You really do not want to, because you don't want to overwhelm too much Nurse and Desharnais or CC Kulak, because those Dallas forwards will have their way with Nurse and Desharnais pairing on the back end. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Maybe you do move up a Nurse and put him with the neck, or put him with a Bouchard to try and help that out. But it's gonna be it's a challenge on Chris Knoblauch and his coaching staff, because the Dallas Stars, another team that will make the same mistake twice. They'll figure out how to get around you. They'll figure out how to plug those holes to try and even the series up before it goes back to Edmonton in Game 3. That's really going to be the tough task for Chris Knoblauch going forward here, Andrew.
Do you find that Knoblauch has like a good attention to detail for finding matchups, or like assessing matchups that don't work and figuring out why they don't work? I know you've only been able to watch him for like over like a bit over half a season, I guess. But how do you find him in terms of adjustments? Because I know watching Marty St. Louis every day for the last several years now, I find he's very quick on the uptake with forwards, but slower on defense. I don't know necessarily if that's based on, who's coaching the defense, because the head coach usually doesn't run lines during the game. But it does seem like figuring out what works in terms for St. Louis' brain works a little bit quicker for forwards than defense, which I think is natural because he was a forward.
Right.
Where do you see Knoblauch on that? Do you think he'll identify defense being an issue, or do you think he'll adjust the forwards more likely?
It'll be more for the D. I think for the forwards, it was a decent night for the forwards. Again, you got more from just the top line. You got more from guys. You saw even though he didn't score, you saw production. You saw efforts from Fogel, McLeod, Ryan. So I think it'll be more on the defense that you're going to see Knobloch try and figure things out. Again, we saw that first Dallas goal, the Brett Kulak goof that gave Sagan that first goal. So I think it's gonna be Chris Knobloch adjusting more and figuring out what to change in game two. He's not stubborn. He's not set in his ways. I mean, I loved him as the head coach, Jay Woodcroft, but at time Woodcroft would stick to certain things that didn't work, which did hurt at times. Knobloch is very much a, hey, this didn't work in game one. I'll adjust in game two, or even mid game. Even mid game, you'll see Chris Knobloch switch things up and say, okay, this isn't working. Well, I can't stick with this even for another shift. Let's see what else can try and do to adjust to get back into the game here, which I appreciate from Chris.
Yeah, it's really fun watching this coaching matchup because these are two very smart coaches, you can tell. And I mean, look at the success that Pete DeBoer has had. Like 3 different teams to this stage in the postseason. That's incredible. I know he's had his detractors in the past, but it is really difficult to argue that track record at this point. Obviously you and I, Avery, I'm a little older than you, so I'm probably more in that memory than you are. But when I was growing up in Saskatchewan and Alberta, I moved to Quebec when I was 18. Obviously I watched the Oilers a lot because I lived in Saskatchewan and Alberta. They were who was on TV. My dad was an Oilers fan. And the dominant playoff series outside of Colorado and Detroit for that era for me was Oilers and Dallas, or Stars and the Oilers. A matchup that didn't go the Oilers' way very often. Do you feel that rivalry is kind of being reignited here tonight? There was, some borderline hits early, and it seems like emotions got a little bit high, but mostly under control. Fans are upset because the penalty disparity was wildly in Dallas's favor.
It was
pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Like everything was a penalty that they called, but they missed a lot. Do you find that there's any of that coming back now? Is there a feeling in the Oilers fan base like, oh, this is familiar, we do hate these guys? Or is it New Jersey's, new Dallas Stars, new Edmonton Oilers, different era?
I think there's some who do feel that way, who do say, nah, these are no longer rivals, it's a new team, it's a new era. But you're right, Andrew. For someone, who was a kid mainly in the early 2000s, I do remember the series in 2001, 2003. And you know what? Those series were all, for the most part, 1-goal games, tight checking games, neither team trying to give an inch. And this game reminded me of that, where, it was eventually a 1-goal game, a tight game, double overtime game. It reminded me of that because those series back in the 2000s, you didn't really have a ton of games that were blowouts. They were all 1-goal games, playing overtime games. And the officiating was a little bit iffy, but I think you get a full series again of Edmonton and Dallas going back and forth in a 6 or 7 game series where every game is determined by 3-2 games, 2-1 games, and a couple of overtimes in that series. Oh yeah, the passion and the hatred is going to come back on both sides, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I have 2 distinct memories of those Oilers and Stars series. The first one is the Todd Marchant overtime goal, which I believe was a breakaway. And that was the Game 7 OT winner in round 1 in 97. Sorry. And that was like, an amazing, amazing moment. And I remember another time where I believe the Stars won the series on Oilers home ice at Rexall. And I remember Mike Keane was mic'd up and he was like skating around the rink and chirping fans, being like, go home, your team's done, we took out the trash, get out of here, like trash talking to fans. And I was like, I hate this guy. I used to like him when he was the captain of the Canadiens. I hate this guy now, because you're a kid and you're emotional and you don't realize that kind of stuff actually is great for the sport and the drama. But those are my takeaways. Like those are my strongest memories of Oilers versus Stars in the 90s and early 2000s. I hope that this series delivers on what it showed tonight that it could be, because I think it could be an all-timer.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's funny. I do see some parallels. I mean, maybe it's not one for one, but you got younger stars or young upstarts, guys like Dylan Holloway, Ryan McLeod, Logan Stankoven on Dallas, and you've got the modern day version of the grumpy old men. You got Ryan Suter on Dallas. You got Joe Pavelski. Like, there are some parallels to those matchups and from both eras, I think.
Yeah, you're totally on the money. J Money says Stars in 5. This series is over. Well, that is a bleak view. Very bleak view. Avery, who do you think has it? Do you coming out of this game? Do you feel like
Yes.
the Oilers are in control here after dominating at 5-on-5 on the road?
Right now I think they are, because that's a big thing. We already knew Edmonton could be a team that could score on the power play, but the deciding factor really for me was, can they score at even strength? Can they score not up a man? And they did it this entire game. So right now I got to go the edges to Edmonton, because they showed me that they have the ability to not only score at 5-on-5 against Dallas, but able to do it on the road as well.
Yeah, and normally right now we would do some questions from the stream chat. If you got one, maybe we could do one, but I'll be honest with y'all, it's 10 after 1 in the morning. I gotta be up at 6:30 here on the East Coast with 2 young children who are not gonna let me sleep in, and if I try, will probably like punch me in the balls or something. So I am ready to tucker in. I think we covered this game pretty well, Avery. I'm really excited for the rest of this series, man.
No, of course, as am I. I still think this series goes 6 or 7, but it's going to be fun, especially when things shift back to Edmonton for Game 3 on Monday night.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. All right, Avery, before we go, 6th Stanley Cup for Edmonton this year or no?
I don't want to be too biased, but I will say this. I do think it happens if they get past Dallas and if they end up facing the New York Rangers. I think it's an easy matchup for them playing New York than Florida in the Cup final.
I totally am with you. I think Florida is like the perfect playoff team where they are talented and they're big and they're tough and they are dirty. They are so dirty. And that's tough to beat, man. Like, ask the Boston Bruins. In that series, I have to admit, watching it as a Canadiens fan and having watched the Boston Bruins so many times against the Canadiens, where like even if the Habs beat them, they're so beat up by the end of it that the next series is a write-off. They're gonna get eliminated. It's over. And I felt that watching the Panthers series, that even if the Bruins were able to come back, it was done because they beat the tar out of them. And not all of it legally. They just got away with it. And that's the playoffs, baby.
It's so true.
It is very true. All right, everybody, make sure that you like this stream because it really helps us. Make sure that you share it with your friends because that helps us even more. Subscribe to the Game Over Network channel. Subscribe to Game Over Edmonton. And hey, while you're here, you may as well go out and subscribe to Game Over Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal and all those too. We promise we'll give you some fun stuff to talk about. And when we fully relaunch in October, there's going to be some cool stuff. I really promise the stuff that I'm working on behind the scenes here is really cool and really unique. And we have amazing people to deliver amazing analysis to you in every single NHL market. So thank you to Avery for joining me. Thank you to everyone here watching the show and watching on replay the following morning. I am Andrew Berkshire. He is Avery Lewis McDougall for Game Over Edmonton. We will see you next game.
Game